Reading a few passages from a book titled A Short Demurrer to the Jews by Willaim Prynne from 1656. The introduction of the Jews into England and other nations never advanced the public wealth of the natives and republic, but much impaired it by their usuries and deceits, clipping and falsifying monies, engrossing all sorts of commodities into their hands, usurping the native trades, and becoming such intolerable grievances to them that they were never quiet till they were banished, as their greatest annoyance, and purchased their exiles even with public subsidies granted to their kings to be quit of them, as the premises abundantly evidence. The trade of this nation flourished more after their banishment hence than ever it did before, and their introduction now will but supplant, undo our English merchants and other natives to enrich them, and some few other grandees who shall share with them in their spoils and unrighteous gains, as they utterly supplanted, impoverished, ruined the city of Norlingen in Germany, where they intruded themselves in great numbers by the emperor's privileges, whereupon the citizens in the year 1290, being reduced to extreme poverty by them, rose up in arms and slew a great number of them without distinction of age or sex. They, the Jews, crucified in like manner another Christian child at Blois in France, and near the same time the Jews at Bray in France crowned a Christian man, whom they accused for a malefactor, with thorns, then led him publicly about the town, scourged him with many stripes, and at last crucified him in contempt of Christ. Not long after, the Jews at Paris in France, in like manner, impiously crucified a Christian child called Richard, and sundry others in the year 1236. The Jews at the monastery of Fulda killed many Christian children in a mill, piercing them with poniards and squeezing out their blood to mix and knead it with their unleavened bread in their Passover, as was generally reported, which being discovered, many of them were burnt to death for it, and the rest grievously punished. The year 1252, they massacred and crucified a Christian child at Wissenberg. At Prague in Bohemia, the Jews, on Good Friday in the year 1283, shutting their gates, crucified a Christian man, having first of all done unto him in contempt whatever they had learned was done to Christ by their ancestors, which, when the people had discovered, running to their arms, they raged cruelly against and slew many of these impious murderers. The Jews, in the year 1286, stole away, cruelly tormented, picked with poniards, drew the blood, and impiously crucified a Christian child called Wernerus, not far from the Rhine in Germany, barbarously murdering him after sundry torments. In the year 1287, they tormented and crucified another Christian child at Bern called Rodolphus. That the Jews in Paris and elsewhere did every year steal some Christian child or other brought up in the king's court, and carrying him to a secret house or vault, did on Good Friday or Easter Day, in contempt and derision of Christ and Christian religion, crucify him on a cross, as Christ was crucified, and that they had been frequently apprehended persevering in this wickedness, for which upon detection they were usually murdered, stoned, burned, destroyed, hanged by the furious multitudes, violence, or executed, imprisoned, banished by Christian kings and magistrates. Yet such was their malice to Christ, that they would still persevere therein, and act it over again upon every opportunity, which being so fully justified by these many particular precedents, proofs, authorities, in several ages, places, sufficiently refutes Manasseh ben Israel his bare denial, and poor shifts to evade it, as false and scandalous. How can or dare we receive into our Christian island such barbarous, bloody, obstinate murderers, and inveterate, incorrigible, malicious enemies to, and deriders, despisers of our blessed Savior, death and passion, formerly cast out by our ancestors, amongst other things, for their bloody impieties and unchristian blasphemies of this nature, unless we first renounce both our Christianity and humanity at once, and become as bad as the very worst of Jews. Rudolphus, a monk, Rudolphus, a monk, out of a misguided bloody zeal, stirred up many thousands of people in France and Germany, near the Rhine, to take up the cross for the holy wars, exhorting them in his preaching that they should, in the first place, kill and destroy all the Jews remaining everywhere in the cities and towns, as being the greatest enemies of Christ, the seeds of which doctrine took such deep root in many cities of France and Germany that in a tumultuous sedition and uproar they slew most of the Jews in those parts, but such who fled into fenced cities and castles. In the year of Christ 1298, one Rindfleisch, and a husbandman in Germany, openly preached to the people that he was sent from heaven and specially chosen by God to root out the Jews in all places, and proclaimed, "Whoever will have the Christian commonwealth to be safe, let him follow me." Whereupon the people, flocking to him in great multitudes, and choosing him for their captain, sought out the Jews in Würzburg, Nuremberg, Rothenburg, Bamberg, Ohnberg, and all other towns and villages in Franconia and Bavaria, and slew many of them. The greatest part of them in these places, both men and women, obstinately setting their own houses on fire, and burning both themselves, wives, children, with their houses, household stuff, and goods together, that they may not fall into the Christian hands. In the year 1349, there being a great plague and mortality in Germany, the Jews were generally accused for the chief authors or increasers thereof, by poisoning all the wells and fountains, to destroy all the Christians, and corrupting likewise some baptized Jews and other Christians with money and charms so far that they could willingly have destroyed and slain all their fellow Christians, which some of them confessed upon their examinations. Hereupon the common people, in great rage and fury against their magistrates and bishops' wills and commands, which neither could nor durst withstand their violence, fell upon all the Jews in Bern, Freiburg, Argentine, Worms, Oppenheim, Frankfurt, Mentz, Spires, and other places, slew and brained many of them, burned other of them, hanged up many others upon gibbets, pillaging, burning, breaking, and pulling down their houses, the Jews themselves in many of these places, burning both themselves, wives, children, goods, to avoid the enraged people's fury, very few of them escaping, who were baptized to preserve their lives. The inhabitants of Spire, fearing the air would be infected with the stink of the slaughtered Jews, dead corpses lying in the streets, although most of them were burnt, put them into empty casks and threw them into the Rhine. All such who protected any of the Jews for money, as some did, were also murmured against and hated by the people, that they were in great danger of their lives, which some of them lost, as Albertus Argentinus records at large, which sad calamity came upon them by God's just judgment, many of them being found guilty of all sorts of wickedness, poisonings, the murder of many children, forging of letters, counterfeiting, and corrupting of money, thefts, deceits, and other villainies, whereby they offended the divine majesty. There was decreed by the Council of Basel, Session 20, and enacted by the Withogoth Law, 12, Title 2.3, Pope Alex III, Decree I6C7, prohibited all Christians under pain of excommunication to cohabit with the Jews or keep company with them because their manners and Christians accord in nothing, and they by reason of their continual conversation and daily familiarity might easily incline the minds of simple people to their superstition and infidelity. And should not those men who pretend themselves far greater zealots than the Goths, Spaniards, or Pope, and the popish canonists, upon these very grounds much more opposed, prohibit their readmission into England in this giddy apostatizing age, lest their company and society should easily seduce the unstable people to their Judaism and infidelity, to Christ's dishonor, their own damnation, and the infamy of our church and government. The rather, because if extraordinary care be not taken herein, under pretext of Jews, we shall have many hundreds of Jesuits who derive both their name and pedigree from the Jews, even from Iusi and his family of the Jesuits, number 1644, as some of them affirm in print, though others from other grounds. Of popish priests and friars come over freely into England from Portugal, Spain, Rome, Italy, Poland, and other places, under the title, habit, and disguise of Jews, of purpose to undermine our religion, church, and state, and sow the seeds of heresy, blasphemy, popery, superstition, schisms, and divisions amongst us, they having formerly sent over some of late years amongst us, under the notion and vizard of converted Jews, as Ramsay the Scot, and Eleazar, and Joseph ben Isaiah, all Jesuitical, wicked, cheating impostors, the last two whereof have cheated the honest people of the nation of many £1,000, being notorious villains, one of them formerly a trooper and plunderer in Prince Rupert's army, as he confessed in his hostess at Dursley in Gloucestershire in his drink, where he would have ravished the maidservant of the house, locking the door upon her while she was warming his bed in the night, and upon her crying out for help, fled away presently in the night to avoid apprehension, and yet wanders about cheating the people in other places instead of being brought to tribune for his villainies. And if they abuse and cheat us thus already, much more will they do it upon and after the Jews' admission. That they, the Jews, were so exceedingly execrable and detestable to the people in all places where they resided, both for their infidelity, blasphemies, apostasies, and enmity to Christ and Christianity, circumcising and crucifying Christian children, clipping of coin, falsifying of charters, extortion, brokage, usury, frauds, unconscionable Jewish cutthroat dealing, and discrepancy of manners from the English, that many places and ports opposed their coming over. Other towns, as Newcastle, Winchelsea, Wycombe, Newbury, Berkhamsted, Southampton, and other places, purchased exemptions or removals of them, and those towns where they resided frequently rose up in a tumultuous manner against them, burning their houses, beating, abusing, killing their persons, pillaging their goods, and forcing them to fly to the king's castles for sanctuary. That the Jews' usury was no way countenanced nor approved, but generally condemned and frequently released by our kings long before the Statute de Judaismo, which most infallibly appears to be made in 3, edition 1, not in 18, as Sir Edward Coke very grossly mistook, and that the banishment of the usury by it was not the cause of their voluntary banishment hence, as he most fondly conceded.